All right. So what's going on, y'all? Sean of Masswat Tutoring here. Hopefully you're doing all right this Tuesday afternoon, the eve of Christmas Eve. So it's afternoon at least here in Georgia where I am. But anyhow, we're gonna talk today about SAT math mastery. You know, the SAT is for a lot of people is difficult. A lot of people will take the SAT and find the math in particular intimidating. And one of the things I've dedicated myself to is making the SAT math section easier for people. And this actually does have a personal connection to me because of the fact that raising my SAT score was that raising SAT score is something that I personally worked on. Okay. And I was able to raise my score pretty significantly, verbal and math. But the reason why I had to raise my score is because when I first took the PSAT, I actually took it and I'm gonna get into this. I took it and I was unpleasantly surprised to see like my score. I thought, just like any other standardized test, I usually did very well. And I was shocked to see how my score was, how low my score was. I expected to be much higher. Like I said, I get into it, but having the score come back like that, it made me embark on a quest to improve my performance, and that I did. Okay, and so I'm going to share what I learned as a high schooler, and what I've learned as a math tutor here as well. Okay, so we're going to get into this. This is particularly for parents, but if you're a student, you're welcome to attend as well. But we're going to get into this here in a second. Give me a second here. If you are a parent and you're watching this, then definitely feel free to ask questions that you may have. But I want this to be somewhat demonstrative, what we do here. All right, so let's get into it. Oh, I'm sorry. It probably would help if I shared my screen. Let's see. All right, SAT Math Mastery, an introduction to SAT Math Mastery, because there are levels to it. All right, let's go. So I just tell you a little bit about myself. I graduated from Jones County High School in Middle Georgia, 2003. I got my bachelor's in electrical engineering, class of 2007, Mercer University. I also got my master's from Mercer University a few years later, and I have under my belt a 14 plus year career in the um, Air Force as an electronics engineer. So engineering, and of course, math have been a big part of my life, for a long time. So when I was in the 10th grade, I took the PSAT, and that was about 2001, and my score came back like 960. I was shocked. 960. Because I was one who made mostly A's. I was on the academic team and the math team, and I always had high marks. I was always kind of scoring closer to the top of the class, and I got a 960 back. So I was like, this can't be right. Maybe they gave me the wrong one or what, but it showed me that the SAT is a different kind of test. And it immediately told me that I need to do something before I take the test next time. Especially because since it's so important for college admissions. Okay. So I knew I had to do something. So I began trying to find any kind of problems I could, practicing, practicing, practicing. Even if it was a little bit in a day, I was practicing. I got my parents got me one of those big thick SAT books. Excuse me, that the college board makes, the people who make the SAT, and I would just practice in it. And I got to where my highest combined score was a 1240, which is great for me. Um, Math section 640 was my highest, And so that was what happened. I was able to raise my score significantly, thankfully, and and that's why I do what I do now. I want to help people learn what I learned. So let's kind of go a little bit in depth about the SAT, not too much, but it's important to kind of understand what the SAT is about anyway. So the SAT, formerly known as Scholastic Aptitude Test or the Scholastic Assessment Test, is really purposed um, in a certain way. It's not so much of determining what you remember. To some degree, they want to see what you remember, but it's more so how do you use what you remember? Okay. How do you think critically? How do you use the information that you know to solve problems or to figure out problems, verbal, math, whatever section? How deep is your knowledge of the material? Because anybody can perhaps just regurgitate facts, but they want to see, can you use those facts to figure out problems? Do you know how to kind of pull everything together and solve problems? And so that was what I really had to understand, um, with the SAT. Now, part of this information that I have in these slides may be somewhat outdated now, but as you may know, during the pandemic, a few years back, a lot of schools adopted a test optional policy. Um, actually not necessarily requiring SAT, or like, if you took it, fine. If you didn't, they wouldn't worry about it. And I kind of go through that here. Uh, the thing is, now a lot of schools have indeed resumed the requirement for the SAT, ACT, and whatnot. The most important thing is that whatever school your child is interested in attending, your child needs to know what their test policy is, what their standardized test policy is, and see if they actually are requiring the SAT. Again, more likely now they are, but there are still some schools out there that make it optional. Even if though it's optional, there's still very important reasons that your child should take the SAT. So let's talk a little bit about that. So a great SAT score will help your child to stand out among thousands of college applicants. A great SAT score will help a school to see your child's potential to succeed at their institution. Again, with the SAT being a basically a critical thinking test, they want to see, can this person think at the college level? It's just another metric. It's not the only metric, but it's just another metric to see how well your child can think at the college level. And then finally, a great SAT score can help your child to qualify for hundreds of thousands of dollars in academic scholarships. And that is not an exaggeration. Okay. It's not an exaggeration. You've been to school, you know it's not an exaggeration. All right. So for example, if you live here in Georgia, there's a state scholarship called the Zell Miller Scholarship, which will give up to full tuition for public schools and a portion of tuition for private schools. And they basically require a 3.7 GPA and a 1200 minimum SAT score. Okay. And so this is an example of where a lot of people can get that GPA, but what about the SAT score? That's a lot of times the kicker. You're not getting that SAT score. Very, very important, because you don't want to like have great grades, but then your SAT score has you falling behind. That's a real bummer, especially if all of your tuition could be covered. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about SAT math, what it involves. Let's talk about what kind of math is on there. So College Board defines the type of math that's on there as problem solving, modeling using tools strategically, and using algebraic structure. That's their summary of the math on the SAT. Okay. Now, specifically, there are four types of math on the SAT. You have algebra, which is basically like what you learn in Algebra 1. You have advanced math, which is like Algebra 2, essentially. You have problem solving and data analysis, like doing math that's kind of based on graphs and tables of data and, different kind of metrics and stuff like that. And then you have geometry and trigonometry. Okay. And a lot of people get a little nervous when they hear trig. Don't worry about that, because they don't go very deep into the trig. It's more like right triangle trigonometry is what they touch on, but they get into geometry a little bit. Okay. All right. If you've taken algebra 2, completed algebra 2 in high school, you basically cover all the methods on the SAT score. I like to try to help students to understand that, especially so if you're like 10th, 11th grade, you may have already taken the algebra 2. You've technically seen everything on there. Okay. And so I like to reassure students of that so that they can understand you just have to review. You don't necessarily have to learn anything new. You have to do some review. So the current SAT, which is different than the one I took on paper, has two 35-minute modules with up to 44 questions. It's multiple choice largely in what you call student produced response. Basically, you have to compute something and you have to put the actual number in there versus selecting A, B, C, or D, if that makes sense. Calculator now, in contrast to when I was taking the SAT, is allowed for all sections, all SAT math sections. Now, because it's a digital, um, SAT, then the calculator is built in. Okay, so it's not going to be like, you use your graphing calculator, that type of deal. The calculator is built in. Okay, and then you also have the ability to go back. Basically, the digital annotation where if you skip a problem, you can go back and look at the problem that you skipped if you were skipping it for the sake of time. Okay. Each section of SAT math is generally arranged from easy to more challenging. Okay. And one of the things I want to emphasize now, which I emphasize again, is that when you take the SAT, extra information is normal to come across in SAT math problems. So important. So important. That's one of the things I didn't really understand when I was first taking the SAT. But it's important to understand that they put extra stuff in there to see if you're gonna essentially take the bait. This is where like critical thinking and really being able to look at the problem and see what it's asking, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but this is where this becomes important. Okay. So here are the three rather key strategies I want to give you today for making a 600 or higher on the SAT. Number one, which we'll go over, is refreshing your toolbox through strategic review, which I'll explain what I mean by that. Number two is practice a lot. Don't underestimate how much practice you need. And finally, number three is learn to understand the question, specifically what the question is asking you. All right. So number one was refresh your toolbox through strategic review. What in the world do I mean by that? When I say toolbox, I mean your math toolbox, your math skills toolbox. All of the things that you've learned when you go to take the SAT, chances are you're going to need to review some concepts that you learned, but that you just simply don't remember anymore. You're going to need to go back and just kind of like dig that stuff out of, blow the dust off, dig it out of the dirt and kind of refresh your memory. Okay. So for example, just to throw some things out there, do you remember stuff like exponent rules? How to factor a polynomial? Do you remember how to complete the square? Okay. Do you remember what the vertex of a parabola is? Do you remember what vertex form the vertex form of the equation for a circle is? Okay. Do you know different details with circles, such as arcs and tangents and chords, inscribed angles? Do you remember how all that stuff works? There's not a lot of geometry on the SAT, but there's a little, there will be some. So do you remember that stuff? Do you remember like generally like linear equations and percents? These are some examples of some things you need to make sure that you actually remember when you go into the SAT. Some more than others. Um, but I'm just kind of throwing these phrases out there. So if you're thinking like, oh, really? I don't know if I remember completing the square, might be a good time to refresh your memory on stuff like completing the square, or percents for sure. You know, let's keep on going. Number two. Now, this might sound like duh whenever I say this about practicing, but it is so true. Hear me. You need to practice, and you need to practice a lot. You need to have a regular routine of practice for the SAT. Okay. Getting better at math is similar to building muscle. I like working out, so I like lifting weights and stuff like that. And The thing about building muscle is you have to do the work, you have to be consistent. You can't just lift one time and then think that you're going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger or somebody like that. You have to kind of come back a few times a day. I mean, excuse me, a few times a week and keep on doing it. And then you also have to, you're going to experience struggle. You have to experience that. And what I mean by that is sometimes people think whenever they go to learn something, it's going to be like, oh, yeah, I know this. A lot of times when you go into learning something, you don't already know it. And so there may be some time period where it's like, I'm not quite getting this. I'm not quite getting this until the light bulb turns on. So people tend to be scared of the struggle or scared of, scared of that feeling. And I always say, don't worry about that like that. Like you have to experience that. That's a part of learning. Dr. Andrew Huberman of Huberman Lab, one of my favorite podcasts. He's a neuroscientist. He talks about the struggle of learning. Like the struggle actually means you are learning something. Okay. And so we should embrace that. Now, when I say practice, you need to be practicing most days of the week. You know, I say 3 days a week, bare minimum. Bare minimum. Okay. Practice with a timer. Why? Because you want to, I mean, at least sometimes do that because you want to try to simulate a similar test environment, at least sometimes, so you can kind of feel that same feeling. So you don't surprise yourself when you're taking a lot of time to solve some of these. And hello. Hey, thanks for joining. So you want to practice with a timer at least some of the time. Another thing is do not cram. And when I say cram, I mean like if you're like a month out, 2 or 3 weeks out from taking the SAT, then and you're trying to just hurry up and get a big thick book and practice, you kind of setting yourself up to not really benefit from any practice. Okay. So ideally you want to be out 2 or 3 months getting ready. Ideally, you want to practice with that much time beforehand. Okay. And then the other thing I want to say is don't be afraid to take the SAT multiple times. I personally took the SAT 3 times. Um, Take it at least twice. Take it at least 2 times because some of your score will improve likely just by virtue of exposure. Okay, and so that counts as practice too. But take the SAT as many times as you want. Especially if your goal is to get into a specific school. Take the SAT at least twice. Okay. Now, for those of you who are joining now, just make sure, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I will have a point later on, where we answer questions or whatever. Okay, so I see your question here. Um, okay, yeah, great question. So I'll get to that here in a second. Excellent, excellent. Okay, all right. So the third point I wanted to give is when you take SAT math, you really have to learn to understand the question. A lot of questions are missed because people are reading the problems in the SAT math sections and they're giving answers, but the answers aren't really answers to the question that they're asking. Okay. Like I said before, SAT math problems often, especially when they become like medium to more difficult, they're going to put some information in there that may not really be necessary for you to solve the problem. So sometimes when we do math problems, we kind of go into the problems and we're thinking that I'm going to use everything that they tell me in the word problem, but you're not necessarily going to do that. You have to be able to discern, as I say here, pay close attention to the question statement so you can discern what information do I need, what information is extraneous, what information doesn't matter. Okay. The question statement will help you know what you need and what's extra. It'll also help you to know if you actually finish the problem because you may have solved part of the problem, but you may not have solved the full problem. Okay. And understanding the question will also help you to filter out additional clues. Now, let me actually pause and go ahead and answer your question here. Okay. So you say, right now I'm grade 11, and after 12th, I really want to go to top university. So any tips, suggestions, or a path? So the main thing I say is this: being in 11th grade, you really, really, really need to be doing all of your research into learning about the type of schools you want to go to, like the specific schools. I'm assuming that when you say you want to go to a top university, you kind of have some schools in mind. So, like, you really need to know the ins and outs of their requirements. Like really, really learn about the schools you want to go into. You know, learn about the application process, learn about the median SAT, ACT scores, learn about the everything about them. When I was in 10th grade, that's what I was doing a whole lot of, just doing a lot of research into the schools I was interested in and what the median GPA and all that kind of stuff was. So this is the time for that. Also just generally be working hard in school. Work hard. Like if you're not sure of, for example, how to study, you need to learn to study right now because that's going to be very important for the SAT. I mean, not for the SAT, for getting into a top university. Also, um, as I'm talking about here, a great SAT score is something that you really want to be working toward. So, like daily or practice at least most days of the week. If your score is not where you want it to be working on it. Like you really want to be dedicated to it. If you really want to go to whatever school you want to go to, this is what you need to work on. Because let me say this too, and then I'll move on. When you look on a college university's website and you see like the median GPA of the entering class, the median SAT of the incoming freshman class, don't strive just for that. You really want to supersede that. So when you get that information, your goal needs to be, I want to really, really, really shine. Okay. Because when you are, if you're just kind of like generally like median performance, you may get in, but if you really want to get into the school, you really want to make sure that you shine. Now, also, I'll say this, whatever activities you choose after school might be important as well, like whatever extracurriculars, typically, people might do community service or you might have a job or whatever. But choose those things well. Like I say, it's a good time for you to really explore the things that you really like. Because a lot of times when you kind of engage in activities that are along the lines of things that you personally like to do, especially if they're contributing to um others in some way, that's a good idea. I think schools look on those things finally because they see this is a real well-rounded person who seems like they would actually, we want that type of person to come to our school, this type of person who's doing this kind of stuff in the world, if that makes sense. Okay. So, but I will say on that before I go on, be careful not to lose yourself. And what I mean is don't just choose something for your college application. Choose something that actually really does match with what you want to do and what fulfills you, you know, that will also, be something that schools smile on, so to speak, or that schools like to see, if that makes sense. But don't choose it just because a school would like to see it, because that's not the way you want to live your life. Hopefully, that helps. All right, so it's time for an example problem. So I have a problem here, and this is actually a problem I picked up from the SAT Suite Question Bank, which is a bank of problems that College Board has um, on their website, real SAT problems. And so we're going to go over this one here in a second, or we're going to go over it now. Okay. Okay, great. So great question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over this problem and then we'll address your question. Okay. So that's a really good question. Um, all right. So let's look at this here. So remember, we're talking about the importance of oh, I didn't mean to go to the second problem. Give me a second here. Okay. Um, so this problem says, give me a second, use a pen. All right. So again, remember, we're talking about understanding the question. Why is this doing this? Sorry. Okay, let's select the pen. Okay, here we go. So this is what we're working on right here. So this problem says the table gives the coordinates of 2 points on a line in the XY plane. The y-intercept of the line is k minus 5. B, where k and b, that's a typo, are constants. What is the value of b? Okay, so what is the question statement right here? What is the value of b? We are trying to find b. You note that they have a variable k in here, but k is not what we're trying to find per se. We may need to find it, but that's not what we're actually looking for. Now, looking at this, we're talking about a line, we're talking about y-intercept. So, we're talking about slope intercept type stuff, like linear equations. Now, the y-intercept of the line is at k minus 5b. If you remember about the y-intercept, this is why it's good to kind of review some things. Y-intercept is that's where x is equal to 0. Okay. And so if this is where the y-intercept is located, then that means k minus 5, which is in the place of the x coordinate, should be equal to 0. Okay. So k minus 5 equals 0, and therefore k is equal to 5, right? Now, remember we're asking what is b. So b is going to be the y-intercept, y equals mx plus b. So what we need to know is we need to know the slope and we need to know the y-intercept. I mean, not the y-intercept. We need to know the slope, and then we need to know an x and a y, which we will know here in a second. If k is 5, that means this coordinate is 513, and this one is going to be 5 plus 7, which is 12 negative 15. So once we find the slope, then we'll have the slope, we'll have an x and a y, and then that'll help us to find b. The slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So you see several steps. We're still going for what is b. So it's going to be 13 minus negative 15 over, what's that? 5 minus 12, which is 28 over negative 7, which is negative 4, right? Now we can plug in and find what we are looking for, what the value of b is. Okay, so let's pick one of these. So we'll choose this point. So y equals mx plus b, plug in that y value. 13 equals negative 4 for the slope, then 5 plus b. So 13 equals negative 20 plus b at 20. Um, and so b is equal to 33. Okay, now, so you see, we had to understand what we're looking for. We did have to find out what a couple of other things were, but then we couldn't lose sight of where we were going. Okay, all right. So let's go to the next one here. In the figure, AC equals CD, so that's this line right here is equal to this line. So that means this triangle at the bottom is an isosceles. The measure of angle EBC is 45 degrees. It's a good idea to label when you're taking the SAT if you can. And the measure of angle ACD is 104. ACD, so this is 104. Okay, what is the value of x? So we're looking for x, which is right here. Don't lose sight of that. Okay, but we're going to have to find a few other things first. Now, so let's look at this here. So we know if this angle is 104 degrees, then the angle adjacent to it, since it forms a straight line with that one, is going to be, what's that, 76? Right. Okay. Now we know 2 out of 3 angles in this top triangle here. The sum of the angles inside of a triangle is, again, something you should remember from geometry, 180. So that means this angle right here should be equal to 180 minus 76 minus 45. So 180 minus 76 minus 45. Oh, sorry. 45. So this is 59 degrees. So these are vertical angles. So this is 59 degrees. Okay. So we're getting there. We need to know now this angle to find x. Now, if this is 104 degrees and this is an isosceles triangle here at the bottom, then this angle and then this angle A in the corner should be equal to each other, and they should be essentially 76 degrees divided by 2, which is 38. 38, because 38 plus 38 is 76. Okay, now we have enough information to find x. So x should be equal to 180 minus 59 minus 38. Or in other words, so 180 minus 59 minus 38 is equal to 83 degrees. Again, now we had to find several angles, But the key is don't lose sight of where you're going. This kind of being able to go through it very quickly. This is a matter of constant exposure, reviewing key skills as well. Okay. All right. So hopefully that was helpful. Okay. All right. So I see, and I do see um your question. Okay, good. B is 33. My answer 180 minus 104. Okay, good. So I see that you were following along. Sorry, because I had to block something off my screen for a second. All right, good. Let's keep on going. And I will yes. Yeah, well, yeah, so you had to divide 76 by 2 to get 38, and then X should have been 83 degrees. Hopefully I'm understanding your question. And I will answer more of your questions. We're not going to go over this. Oh, so this actually is not the give me a second here. Sorry, this I may have opened up the wrong. Yep. Give me a second. So I'm gonna have just stay on. I need to pull up a different um something here. But anyway, so I wanted to just do a couple of examples just to kind of illustrate the importance of like really understanding what the SAT is asking because it's so common because of the nature of the SAT to like read something that's not there, and then miss a problem and you could have understood it, but you were answering something that wasn't really uh the main question. Okay. Sorry, give me a second here. I'm just kind of pulling up this other thing here. Just give me 1 second. Just kind of having some technical things I need to work out. All right, so let's share again. Where is it at? Right here. Okay. All right, here we go. All right. So to conclude, and then we'll get to your questions. A great SAT score is important, regardless if it's the school that you're wanting to go to requires it or not, because it'll help you to stand out. It's one of the things that help you stand out, and it also can help to qualify you for hundreds of thousands of dollars in academic scholarships. That is not an exaggeration. So don't shortchange your future and leave money on the table by not preparing for the SAT. Do all the other things we talked about as well, making sure you have strong school performance, making sure that you're involving yourself in extra curricular activities that actually do fulfill you, and develop your study habits and practice for the SAT. Okay. All right. So let's keep on going and then we'll get to these questions. I actually record on our YouTube channel many problems that are like just free SAT math practice. Some of them are like more directly SAT problems. A lot of them are like math competition type problems, but they're still very good practice for the SAT because they cause you to think critically about the math that you know. So I encourage you to, to join on YouTube, become a subscriber. When I post these problems, you'll be notified. Practice every single one of them. It's free. It's free help that you can use every single week because I do 2 or 3 problems a week. Okay. Now, and I do want to say this. So I have a resource here at MassWalk Tutoring for excellent, and thank you for that. I have a resource, a online SAT math review course. It's called a quick review because what we do is we review the most commonly used math skills on the SAT. Okay. Some of what I mentioned earlier in this workshop, but this is great for students, especially who need to review quickly. You got like a month or so before you take the SAT again. Um, it's even better for those who have more time than that. But it's good. It's a self-paced online course that has a few modules where you can go through, you review certain math skills. You go through example problems in each module. You have homework problems along with video reviews in this. So this is getting a comprehensive review of these math subjects. Um, and until 2026, it's only 149. Once it hits 2026, the price is going up to 209, but I'm just making that available here now. But the way to give me a second here, let me share that link. But the way to access that particular course is through the following link, which I'll post in the chat right there. So, especially now during the winter break, depending on where you are, if you're on break, this is a great time to go ahead and just start getting regular practice in. If you're really dedicated to preparing and maximizing your score, this is a great time to do it. Even when you're in school, spare 10, 15 minutes a day and dedicate that to SAT math practice, while you also simultaneously work on the other things. Okay. So there's the link to that. I hope that you'll consider joining. And now let's answer some more of your questions. Okay. So I just kind of keep that up here. So I'm going to go through and kind of see what other questions were asked. Okay. So you said, I haven't already started to give SAT exam. I don't know where to start from. How to read for SAT, and should I be prioritizing my high school results or SAT results? So that's an interesting question. So if so, I'm assuming so you haven't done the SAT before. You really need to try to take the SAT at least once before you get out of 11th grade. At least one time. At least one time. Okay. And so I think the SAT picks back up in February or March or something like that. I can't remember because I don't always review the test dates. But you need to go ahead and take the SAT. You need to take the SAT at least once in the 11th grade. So make sure that you're working on that in particular. Go to collegeboard.org, which I type here. Go to collegeboard.org and register to take the SAT. Or even if you just go ahead and like take a practice test, they have many free tests available. Okay. Um, and then when you ask the question, let me see how to read for SAT. Okay. So I may need you to clarify that for me. Um, but I will say on that note, you make me think about the verbal section of the SAT. I don't really do a lot of help with that, but I can give you some pointers. One of the best things you can do when it comes to the verbal section of the SAT is to like literally read. Like read, novels, read newspapers, read stuff that's interesting to you that's going to be like written at like a, relatively high level. Read for understanding. Read to understand what's being talked about, if that makes sense. Because the verbal section also tests your critical thinking skills. How well can you really understand? Can you read into this stuff? Understand what's being asked. Okay. So very, very important to read, to simply read. Another thing you can do is if you ever come across words that you read anywhere or you hear from people that you don't understand, define them. Like literally carry a dictionary around with you or use the dictionary that you access on your phone. Look the word up, write it down, commit that word to memory because they actually will test your knowledge of words and even word structure to some degree as well, in the English language. Okay. Okay, so you asked where I'm from and what university I went to. So I'm from Georgia and I went to Mercer University. I actually talked about this a little earlier in the presentation. It's a private school in middle Georgia that has an engineering program, and I wanted to go either to Georgia Tech or to Mercer once I actually found out about Mercer. But then I finally settled on Mercer University. Okay. So yeah, I think that answers questions. Let me see if there are any other questions down here. Okay. 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 Cool. Cool. I see that you were following along. Okay. So yeah, if you have any other questions, you can post them. I'll extend the invitation for just a couple more questions. But yeah, um this is really the time. 11th grade is really, really, really the time to really get dialed in. As far as the college preparation goes, like making sure that you're getting the tests taken and you know practicing to get your SAT score up and different stuff like that. This is really, really the time. By the time, so like I said, I really started. I wish I had even started in ninth grade, but I just didn't know to think about it then. But by 10th grade, I was like, okay. I had to kind of figure out how I'm gonna get into college. I know I'm going, I just don't really know what it takes, like the process. And so I dialed in like crazy in the 10th grade. And 11th grade is not too late. It's not too late. It definitely isn't, but like literally now, like really, really kind of get your mind into that. Um, and start finding the schools you are interested in going to. Okay. I can't remember how many schools I had that I was interested in, but it was two in Georgia. I think I was interested in like Vanderbilt and um I'm trying to think where else. But just find out everything you can about those particular schools and use that information and really, really dial in. Like I say, develop your study habits for the SAT, of course, but then also generally. Okay, I actually have a study guide. If you subscribe to my email list, and there should be a link in the description. Um, you'll get like a study, like a guide on learning how to study. That I encourage you to check out. But learning how to study is very important for college because in college it's not like high school. It's not. They give you a taste of it in high school if you take, especially if you take like AP courses or honors courses and stuff like that. But you have a lot of college courses where the professors don't really teach you anything, and that's normal. They may go through that information so fast, so they may not really do much of any sort of going over the subject matter. Okay, and so okay, um, okay. So explain to me when you say your 12 results. What do you mean by that? Explain what you mean by your 12 results. I'm not sure what you mean. Is that you mean like your results in the 12th grade or what? My school doesn't provide. Oh, okay. Well, but here's the thing, and I get it, because like my school, we had a couple of AP courses, but compared to a lot of other schools, we had very, very few. We had like AP calculus, and we had AP history, and maybe AP literature. That might have been all that we had too. So we didn't really have much either. But don't worry about that. Like just really strive to do the very best you can where you are. Like another thing, and your school may or may not have it, but you may have dual enrollment where you can take some college courses that your high school allow you to take through like a local community school or something like that. That might be a good idea as well. But even if you don't have those, your goal needs to be to lock in right now and to do the very best you can with where you are. Do that because again, especially have the higher the profile of the school you're trying to get into. It's a lot of people who are applying, a lot of people who have the great grades and all this kind of stuff. But you want to stand out, you know. So do great in school, become great with studying, make a great SAT um, score. Let me see. And as far as what you prioritize, so it's kind of hard to say, but I'll say like really strive to do the best you can in school first. Okay. Um. Oh, okay. In my country, there is an exam which is very important. The exam is taken by a national examination board. Okay. Okay. So that's a good question. So I'm not sure about that because I'm only more familiar with what happens here in America. However, I wouldn't be surprised if schools in the U.S. actually do know about this exam that you're talking about. So, if you're wanting, in particular, if you're wanting to come to school here, I that's a good question. I mean, another question I have with that is, I wonder how similar this test that you're talking about is to the SAT because it could be that they're similar, and to prepare for one is kind of to prepare for another one. If you understand what I'm saying. Um, so that's a good question. I just don't really know about that particular exam. But okay, got you. You're from Nepal. Cool. So, I would just say it kind of depends on which one do like this is what I would say. I would strongly encourage you, since you, I guess, have yet to really get into SAT. I would strongly encourage you to kind of start to like to go on collegeboard.org, um, and to learn about the SAT, like the kind of test it is. Take a practice test, so you can see, because it could be that you preparing for this national exam in Nepal actually helps you with the SAT as well. Now, of course, you have the verbal section as well, which is more, it's English based and whatnot. Okay. Um, yeah, so that could like really, especially in particular with the math portion, it could be something that really helps you with the math portion of the SAT already. But like your best bet is to go on collegeboard.org and to look at their practice test. If you go on collegeboard.org, one of those links I shared, you'll see where you can kind of like create a profile and take a practice test and see how you would do. Just see how you would do, and and that'll help to give you an idea of like if taking the test in your country will help you to prepare for the SAT, particularly the math section. Okay. Now, as far as the verbal section is concerned, like I'll say, the best thing you can start doing right now, as far as I can think, is to like read books in English and whatnot. And because I mean, you demonstrated like with what you're putting here that I mean, you had to have some, definitely decent command of English and whatnot. And forgive me any ignorance on my part, because I know a little bit about Nepal, but not much. I don't know how English is there. But like, try to find stuff to read. Like, get every opportunity you can to read, and then also to look up the definition of words that you're not familiar with in English, and just make that a part of your lifestyle where you just automatically do that. You know, maybe 15 minutes of reading a day, reading some book in English, and then keeping your dictionary close by, or you keep a notebook. Um, oh yeah, wow, yeah, yeah, no problem. Yeah, it's definitely. I figured it was probably very early because you're, way on the other side of the world from here. So kudos to you for joining this live. I appreciate you joining with it being so early. Over there. So kudos to you. That's really cool that you would do that. That shows that you really are serious about what you're doing with your life. So that's awesome. But yeah, so that's really the best I can kind of advise. Otherwise, definitely I appreciate you for subscribing. Definitely stay tuned to what we do here at Mass Tutoring. Share with a friend. Any other of your 11th grade buddies, classmates. Um, share with them. A 3.91 out of 4 is great. So that alone is really great as far as like getting into a top school. So like definitely, be glad about that. Um, so if you can kind of get that reading habit and defining words you don't know, take some practice SAT tests, um, practice math regularly, like in particular like SAT math skills and stuff like that. um, then you'll set yourself up for success. Hope I'll come there soon. The other side. Right, right, right. Yeah, I got you. I got you. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, good, 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 good. Yeah. So yeah, again, I appreciate you. I'm about to wrap it up here, but I definitely appreciate you coming on. I salute you as a young person, for having this kind of initiative and really thinking seriously about this. Just being mindful of it is really like the first step. But now hopefully you receive some tools that'll help you to maximize your SAT score. Again, if you're interested in, some more specific review, I definitely welcome you to take my course and share it with somebody who might benefit from it as well. Um, but yeah, stick around because I'll also be posting problems here and there that can help with the SAT. And just go through the MassWalk Tutoring YouTube page, and you'll see a lot of these different kind of challenge problems I've done. If you can solve those, you're probably in pretty good shape. Okay, if you can solve those math problems, like all of them, then you're probably in good shape. So check them out and see, and just give them a shot. Okay. All right. So yeah, I'm gonna let that wrap up because I do have a couple things to get to, but I appreciate you again for joining. Best of success to you. Let other people know about this, and make sure They know and like and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. Have a great day, over there in Nepal and wherever else people have joined to look at this workshop. And y'all take care.